Good to see everyone this morning. A little past 10. Go ahead and get started. There are 2 handouts at the doors. If you did not grab those, 2. There should be one for chapter 4 and one for chapter 5. So I'll give you a moment. You can grab those. Just to look at it as we walk through Judges 4. If you have your Bible. Judges 4, we're also going to discuss the 4th judge of Israel, the only female judge. Her name is Deborah. And we'll notice several things mentioned about her. Getting into chapter 4. Before we get into chapter 4, chapter 4 is going to detail for us some pretty gruesome details. It's going to detail for us some more gruesome, violent details of an event that took place. And chapter 3 did as well. If you remember chapter 3, that, Ehud concealed. He was a left-handed warrior. He was a Benjamite. The tribe of Benjamin was known for being left-handed, which gave them a particular advantage in battle. And a lot of that is still true today, not in battle necessarily, but in sports, left-handers, they oftentimes have an advantage over right-handed. So it specifically mentions he's left-handed, and he will strap about 1.5 foot long dagger on his right thigh. So when he is before the king, he's able to secretly draw it, and it says that he thrust it into his belly, and the hilt, which is the lower part of the blade, went in after the blade, and he didn't even pull it out. He left it there. It says that his entrails came out, and the king died there, and Ehud escaped. And the king was in his private chamber, so his servants or his guards thought that the door was locked. So the guards thought he was in there taking care of some private business. And after it had been long enough, perhaps even for the king, they realized they should check on him, and he was dead. So pretty graphic detail there of the killing of the king and Ehud there. We're going to have another event take place in chapter 4. And I often say, and it's not original with me, most preachers, teachers of the Bible will tell you the Bible, especially the Old Testament, is not a PG book, not even PG-13. Sometimes it's pretty graphic. And there's some books that some chapters, some passages you want to be very careful about teaching, even to some younger kids. They're not very kid friendly. And anyway, we're gonna read some more events in chapter 4. Before we get there, though, chapter 4, Deborah, first only female judge, and really, and this is not to say anything about women. This is not degrading. This is not sexist. This is not to look down upon. Really, she's the only female leader Israel had even throughout the whole Bible, Old Testament. She stands out for being that one female leader who was appointed a judge. She's even described as a prophetess. The idea of a prophet is that you are a spokesman for God. So she is a prophetess, just a spokesperson for God. She's a judge that God will raise up. Notice the different things, actually, since we're there, Judges 4:4. Just notice now Deborah, a prophetess. That's one thing that we read about her. The wife of Lapidoth was judging, so she was a wife. But that's interesting in the Hebrew. I was reading this week, studying. It doesn't really describe her as a wife in the Hebrew, and I'm a little bit confused why it's translated that way. And so I don't want to say much about it. But what I was reading in the Hebrew doesn't describe her as a wife. I don't know why it's translated wife, but perhaps she was. But in the Hebrew, it describes her as a fiery woman, and perhaps she had a strong personality, type A person, which made her a good judge. And then the latter part there was judging Israel at that time. So there's at least 3 things that we read about Deborah there. She was a prophetess, perhaps she was the wife of Lapidoth and judge of Israel. Now, in my studies this week, just to throw it out there to show you what happens when maybe God's desire, we don't see God's desire or God's. So some of the things that I read this week, a suggestion is that maybe there were no willing and capable men at this time. Maybe all the men were passive. We're going to read about a man here in Judges 4, Barak, who is very passive. He's not much of a leader at all. He doesn't really seem to want to do anything without the assistance of Deborah. And so just for thought, just throw it out there, think on it, and it could be, and we're not told this, so I'm not saying that this is the reason, but it could be there were no willing, capable men to lead, and God needed someone, so he turns to Deborah. And Deborah became a judge and leader of Israel. But she will lead Israel. Remember that cycle. Israel will sin, and they will be oppressed. God will allow them, even the Bible describes it as sell them into oppression. God gives them over to their sin and their wickedness, and He allows them to be oppressed. And then He raises up, then the Israelites cry out to God, and then God raises up a judge to deliver them, and then they live faithfully to Him until perhaps a new generation comes along, and then that generation sins, and they go back into oppression. So we have this vicious cycle in the book of Judges. And I want you to think about this. I thought about this week. I realized that if Israel had done what God originally told them to do, we would not have the book of Judges. If they initially, when they conquered the land of Canaan, and God told them to drive out all of the Canaanites, drive them all out. Don't let anyone survive. Do not commingle with them. Do not intermarry with them. Drive them out. They did not do that. They did not do that. Because of that, now we have to look at Judges, because Israel is living in the land with these wicked pagan nations, and they are influenced by them. And so they are adopting their religion, they are forsaking God, they are bowing down to these false gods, these images now. They are participating in their religious sacrifices and rituals. So Israel, because they did not heed the warning of God and obey what God said, because of that, now we have Israel and Canaanites and all the other tribes influencing Israel, and Israel is sinning, and because of that, we have the book of Judges. The book of Judges is really one of the saddest books in the entire Bible because of the sin of Israel and the influence that these pagans had on the people of God and their sin and their rebellion. So it's one of the saddest books in all the Bible. However, it's also one of the most hopeful, encouraging books in all the Bible. At the same time, because we learn a lot about God in the book of Judges. We learn that as Israel continues to sin, God continues to redeem them. God is a God of 70 times 7. In the New Testament, when I think it was Peter or his disciples asked Jesus, how many times should we forgive someone who wrongs us? 7 times? And Jesus goes on to say, I do not say 7 times, but 7 times 7. Or some translations, 70 times 7. 490. Are you ever going to forgive someone 490 times? No. I believe the Lord's point there is indefinitely. As many times as you are asked to forgive, forgive. But we see that in God, that God is willing to truly forgive when there is repentance. Whether it's 1 time, 2, 3, you name it, however many times, throw a number out there. God forgives. And we see that in the book of Judges. Because as we sit here this morning and we study the book of Judges, we get a little frustrated. I mean, I do. I read the book of Judges and I'm like, why are they doing this? Why do they continue to not learn? And you get a little frustrated at the Israelites, and maybe you think, well, why did God continue to bring them out of oppression? Well, that's God. That's what He does. He forgives, and He redeems, and He does not desire that any should perish. 2 Peter 3:9. So, when we look at the book of Judges, it's really here because Israel allowed the Canaanites, some of them, to remain in the land. It's a very dark book, very sad book, but it's very encouraging at the same time. Chapter 4, let's go through it, beginning in verse 1. If you have your handout, let's see, Judges 4, most scholars again, this is an estimate, we don't know exactly. Placed the book of Judges somewhere between 1450 BC and 1000 BC. So you got about a 450-year gap, just kind of placing it chronologically. The events of Judges 3 were spread over about 145 years. So you can look at those references there that mention how long the previous kings oppressed Israel, and then it will even tell us how long there was peace in the land. So add all those together, and we see how long just one chapter lasted. Judges 4, the king of Canaan oppressed the Israelites for 20 years. So the events that we're about to read, and it will say that in there somewhere, I believe, lasted for about 20 years. The characters that we have in this chapter, we have Ehud. It just mentions that he died. Ehud was the second judge back in chapter 3, verse 12 and following. He is considered a major judge, meaning that a lot of real estate on your Bible is devoted to him and what he did. He's the one who killed the king with the dagger. In chapter 4, we have Deborah, the fourth judge of Israel. We have a man by the name of Barak, and he is a leader of the army alongside Deborah. We'll say a little bit more about him as we read him and read what he does in the text. We have Jabin, the king of Canaan. We have Sisera, who is the commander of Jabin's army. So Jabin is the king, Sisera is the commander of his army. And then we have a second woman in chapter 4, and her name is Jael. And she is the one who will go down in history as doing something quite gruesome to the king of Canaan. And it's going to be so memorable that in chapter 5, which if we have time, we'll just mention a little bit of chapter 5, it's a song that is sung by Deborah and Barak, or Barak. I'm not sure how to exactly. I hear people pronounce it differently. Barak, they sing a song of the victory that they had over the king of Canaan. They sing a song, and then they mention Jael in their song, and what she did to the king. So if you don't know what happened, you're about to learn. All right, chapter 4, verse 1. When Ehud was dead, that's the second judge, we read about him. The children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord. There is the beginning of that cycle. So the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, who dwelt in Harosheth Hagoyim. And so a lot already happening here. You have Israel sin, they are oppressed, so you have two of that cycle, the sin, and now we have the oppression of the Israelites. Verse 3, the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. All right, so just in a couple of verses here, 3 verses, you have sin, oppression, crying out to God. And it's going to start all over again. The children of Israel cried out to the Lord, for Jabin had 900 chariots of iron. Now that's a lot for that day, I'm sure. Doesn't seem like a lot today. I mean, it is a lot today. 900, that's a lot. But, we live in a world now where, armies consist of, probably thousands and thousands of armored vehicles and tanks, and that's the equivalent of that day. 900 chariots of iron. If they have 900 chariots of iron, they probably have 900 or so horses that pull those chariots, and they have just as many men to ride those chariots. And so it's a well-fortified army, and he was well supplied, and he was able to oppress Israel, and he was hard to defeat, except for when God is involved. He had 900 chariots of iron, and for 20 years, so there you have the reference, for 20 years, he had harshly oppressed the children of Israel. Now Deborah, prophetess, the wife of Lapdoth, was judging Israel at the time. And she would sit under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the mountains of Ephraim, and the children of Israel came up to her for judgment. Let me say a little bit about Deborah here, this particular verse. And I've told you since we started the book of Judges, do not think about these judges as someone who sits and passes judgment or rules in court cases like we think of today. So don't think about a judge then as we do today. However, the closest we ever come to that modern day idea of a judge who would pass judgment is here with Deborah. She's the only one that is really described as coming close to actually being a judge in the way that we would think about being a judge. So here she is described as sitting under palm trees in the mountains of Ephraim, and the children of Israel came up to her for judgment or for wisdom or whatever the case may be. And so she is described here as a judge and perhaps passing judgment. She's also going to be a military leader. Now, again, we don't know if she participated in the battle or she was just a good leader and a spokesman for God. And she is nonetheless a judge for Israel. Verse 6. Then she sent and called for Barak, the son of Abinoam, for Kadesh and Naphtali, from Kadesh and Naphtali, and said to him, has not the Lord God of Israel commanded, go and deploy troops at Mount Tabor? All right, I'm going to pause right there. If you take your handout and you turn to your map, and I cannot change it from that dark map, the guy who put this together, I can't change the color of the map. But if you can see, so you see eastern Manasseh right there, so the upper right corner of the page, the eastern Manasseh, his territory. You see the Sea of Galilee. Right under Sea of Galilee, you have Mount Tabor, and then there's an arrow pointing to the western side, and you see a little triangle right there. It's the southwest side of the Sea of Galilee, and that is where it is believed that Mount Tabor is. And so that's where they are. So going back to the text, has not the Lord God of Israel commanded, go and deploy troops out at Mount Tabor? Take with you 10,000 men of the sons of Naphtali and of the sons of Zebulun. And against you I will deploy Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, that's the king of Canaan, and Sisera's the commander of his army, with his chariots and his multitude at the river Kishon, and will deliver him into your hand. So just a conversation here with Deborah and Barak. Did not God command, let's go up and deliver the Israelites. Let's go up against the king, Jabin, Sisera. Let's go up at Mount Tabor. And God is saying he will bring all of his chariots. Remember those chariots of iron that are described. Let's go up and conquer and take over the army, defeat the army. And they will. They will. Sisera will escape. He will escape. And he might not should have chosen to do that. Probably would have rather died in battle like a good, faithful commander of an army. Verse 7. Verse 8. And Barak said to her, now, let me say a little bit about Barak. I told you I'd get to him in just a moment. Some suggest, if you just read commentaries, lectureship books, and just in study, and if you were to read about the judges, I believe there's 12 in the book of Judges. There's 12 mentioned. There are some other judges outside of the book of Judges. Once you get into the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, and other books, there's other men that are described as being a judge. Samuel's one, Eli. But there's 12 in the book of Judges. There are some who suggest that Barak was a judge because he assists Deborah. And they might categorize him as a judge. Well, I have two issues, primarily with that. Number one, the Bible doesn't call him a judge. So that's probably reason number one. I can stop there. But second, when we continue reading, Barak is so passive. He's so passive in his actions that he doesn't really come across as someone who is brave and strong and a military leader like the other judges. And so I think because of those two reasons, I do not categorize Barak as a judge. Some will. I mean, you might read some literature out there and they'd be like, well, let's consider Barak a judge. I don't at all. And so let's get into what he did. Verse 8, and Barak said to her, here's where he's passive. If you will go with me, then I will. He didn't want to go by himself. And we cannot read into this the tone in which he is saying this. He could be, we don't know how he is saying this. We can't read or hear reflection in Barak saying this to Deborah. One of the disadvantages maybe here just reading a text. Sometimes when someone will text us, we read into it, tone and reflection, how that person is saying it. And maybe oftentimes we're wrong in that. Sometimes we read something that comes across as passive-aggressive or rude, but the person really didn't mean that. Anyway, so we cannot read into this Barak's, his tone, his reflection. Maybe he's I don't know, I don't want to suggest anything, but this is what he says. He says, if you will go with me, then I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go. So Deborah tells Barak to go, and his initial response is just that he will not go without Deborah. Now, something else we could suggest is that maybe he was just faithful to Deborah. Maybe he was just faithful to her. Maybe I don't know. I'm throwing out some things that I've read. We don't really know. But here's an interesting response from Deborah. Deborah says to Barak, who really was and should have been the leader of the Israelite army. He led the Israelites to victory, but he wanted to go with Deborah. Now here's what Deborah says. So she said, verse 9, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, there will be no glory for you in the journey you are taking, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. Then Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. So Deborah's response back to Barak is, I'll go with you. She didn't fight him on that. But she says, the glory will not be yours. The glory will not be yours. Because what's going to happen is that Sisera will go and be killed by a woman, and she will receive the glory and not you. Now, I don't know if that lit a fire under Barak or not, but that's her response. And so, interesting dialogue here between Barak and Deborah. Deborah says, go to the Mount Tabor to fight against the king, to fight against the commander of his army, Sisera, to Mount Tabor. Barak says, I won't go unless you go. Deborah says, I'll go, but you will not receive the glory. All right, verse 10. And Barak called Zebulun and Naphtali to Kadesh, and went up with 10,000 men under his command. And Deborah went up with them, or with him. Now Heber the Kenite of the children of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses. We pause right there. Does anything seem off to you tell once we think about it. But we do not know the father-in-law of Moses to be this guy right here. So what does that mean? Well, let's actually look at a reference. So I have a couple. It seems like the father-in-law of Moses went by two different names, and it's not that one. In Exodus 2:18, and then in Exodus 3. So if we just go to Exodus 2 and Exodus 3. Exodus 2:18. When they came to Reuel, their father, he said, "How is it that you have come so soon today?" This would be the same man as, from my understanding and my study. He is here referenced as Reuel. But if you jump forward to chapter 3, verse 1, Exodus 3, verse 1, the more familiar name that might ring a bell to us. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest in Midian. We know him as Jethro, or at least maybe we do, maybe you don't. But when I studied that, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember Jethro. Because I always thought about what TV show comes to your mind? Huh? Beverly Hillbillies. I always thought about Jethro when I studied or learned about the father-in-law of Moses. And so that is the name that we know him most by, Jethro. In fact, he's also mentioned in, we won't turn there, those are two verses that suffice. Judges, or Exodus 18 he's mentioned, and also Numbers 10:29 he's mentioned, not as Jethro, but as Reuel. Hey. Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me. Moses married again. He married, I think, was a Cushite woman
Okay.
that Aaron and Miriam objected to.
Yeah.
I can't tell you where it is, but
Okay.
so this could be the father-in-law that's referred to.
Could be, and that's a good point. I didn't think about that or realize that. That he married again. But what I was going to point out, whether this is accurate or not, the Hebrew here only suggests that this was a distant relative of Moses. But it's translated here as father-in-law. And you're right, and I'm going to look more into that.
The NIV version says that it's brother-in-law.
Says it is his brother-in-law? What translation is that? NIV says brother-in-law. New King James, others say father-in-law. I listened to a preacher this week teaching the book of Exodus. I really like to listen to other people teach. So the way that I study for any text, like Judges 4, is I read the text, and I take my own notes, I read what other people say, and then I like to try to find another preacher teaching on it, and I listen to their teaching. And so the preacher that I listened to brought out just that in the Hebrew Bible, this is not as specific as to say father-in-law, son-in-law, brother-in-law, but just a relative. And I don't know where along the lines it got translated, and it may be his father-in-law. I'm not saying it's not. So, I'm going to look more into his second wife. But this is a relative of Moses. Yes, sir.
It does specify Kenites.
Okay.
So the Kenites were of the Midianites. And so we know Moses met the Midianites when he met his father-in-law, Jethro. And so he invited him to come with them. He told Jethro, come with us. He said the Lord would do you good. This is back in Exodus. And so we weren't clear at that time that the Midianites would come. But we found out later that as Joshua was conquering the land, the Midianites are there, and the Kenites were part of that group of people. So that would be fitting with the priest of Midian.
So you're saying,
I'm saying it's very consistent with him being, even though the name goes from Jethro to.
oh, so you're saying, so verse 11,
Yeah.
now he was the Kenite of the children of Hobab, father-in-law of Moses.
Yeah, and
Okay.
so what's interesting about that whole thing is that you find them conquering in Canaan
Mhm.
with the children of Israel. To me, that's an interesting topic.
Okay.
of discussion. But I'm just saying, it fits that he would be a Midianite
Yeah.
whom
Okay.
Moses met up with when he came out of Egypt.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
that's
Man, look at me learning along with y'all. See? All right, well, I'm gonna put a little bit, just in my mind, I'm gonna look more into that this week. Appreciate the comments. And, either way, this perhaps could be a father-in-law, but it at least, from what I understand right now, in my knowledge, this is a relative of Moses. Had separated himself from the Kenites and pitched his tent in the terebinth tree at, let me find it in my text. Let's start verse 12. And they reported to Sisera that Barak, the son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor. So Sisera gathered together all his chariots, 900 chariots of iron, and all the people who were with him from Arashaph. All right, let's get some of those names. Let me just say this. Because I've had some people come up to me and tell me how to learn some of these names, and I received my first comment a while back, and it was very helpful. I appreciate that comment, and I do it. So, and I've received some since then, and this is just a side note. But what I want you to know, as a congregation and as my brothers and sisters in Christ, I don't get nervous in front of people. In fact, I enjoy it. I enjoy being up here. I enjoy preaching. If I were to have a nervous tick, I don't know if that's the best way to describe it, but I do think that when I get in front of people, reading is my nervous tick. Because I'm not a prolific reader. I'm a very slow reader. And so I do oftentimes learn, or at least listen to how these are said by other people. But then when I stand in front of you, I don't remember it all, and I'm having to read it in front of you, and that's just probably where my nervousness is seen the most. And so don't think that I haven't read the text or don't know how to say some of these words, but anyway, so just so that you know, that's probably my nervous tick coming out and reading, but these words are a little bit difficult for most. But anyway, all right, let's get through at least the text. We have just a couple more minutes left. The Deborah said to Barak, up, for this is the day in which the Lord has delivered Sisera into your hand. Has not the Lord gone out before you? So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 following him. The Lord routed Sisera and all of his chariots and all of his army from the edge of the sword before Barak. And Sisera alighted from his chariot and fled away on foot. So all of the army of the Canaanites are destroyed, again, because of God helping the Israelites, and Barak and the army, 10,000 men, they're all destroyed, except for Sisera is able to run away. And he's a coward, I would say, at this moment. He should have stayed with his men. And I mean, if you're a commander of the army, I mean, you die with your troops. I mean, that's just the way it is. But he runs away. Barak pursued the chariots and the army as far as Harosheth, and all the army of Sisera fell by the edge of the sword. Not a man was left, so the entire army destroyed except for Sisera. Now, we have about 7 minutes. We're going to talk about what happened happens to Sisera. Very, very gruesome. If you don't know what happened, you haven't ever read it. If you just think about it, the details. But instead of dying what might have been a courageous, now he was a pagan, right? I mean, he was a, but he was, you don't have to be religious to be a leader of an army and to die a courageous death fighting alongside your troops. But instead, he's going to die a coward's death at the hand of a woman in her tent. So verse 17, however, Sisera had fled away on foot to the tent of Jael. So there's the second woman in the text. We have Deborah, we have Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. And there was peace between Jabin, king of Zor, and the house of Heber the Kenite. And Jael went out to meet Sisera. So here's Sisera. If you can picture him in your mind, I'm sure he's maybe bloody and beaten and sweaty. And he just fled away from battle. He's been running, I'm sure, fleeing away. And he finds the tent of Jael. Now remember what Deborah said, that if Deborah goes with Barak to fight, that God is going to deliver Sisera into the hand of a woman. And so it seems as though this is by the control of God, or the providence of God, that Sisera comes to Jael. And verse 18, and Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, now listen to the trickery here, listen to her like trying to make him all comfortable. Oh, come into my tent. And what can I get you? You want a blanket? Oh, what else do you want? Water? I got some milk. You want some milk? Like, just listen to it. Play it out in your mind. And Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, turn aside, my lord. Turn aside to me. Do not fear. And when he had turned aside with her into the tent, she covered him with a blanket. Here, let me cover you up. Are you cold? Let me take care of you. Then he said to her, please give me a little water. She's like, I got water. But she opened up a jug of milk. I got some milk. Milk's better than water. Gave him to drink and covered him. And he said to her, stand at the door of the tent. And if any man comes and inquires of you and says, is there any man in there? You shall say, no. So he doesn't know this woman perhaps, has put a lot of trust into her. She is taking care of him deceptively. And he says, go stand by the tent of the door of the tent. If anyone comes this way, just say I'm not in here. And he's so exhausted from war, from fighting, from running, from fleeing away. He's so exhausted he just falls asleep on the spot. Then Jael, Heber's wife, however you say his name, took a tent peg and took a hammer in her hand and went softly to him and drove the peg into his temple, and it went down into the ground, for he was fast asleep and weary. So there you go. He's fast asleep. He's fallen asleep, drank this milk. I mean, there's nothing more comfortable than and relaxing than a nice warm blanket and a glass of milk. You ever taken a glass of milk and warmed it up in the microwave and drunk warm milk? It's supposed to make you fall asleep, right? That's probably not what she did, but I used to do that. There's been times in my life where I can't sleep good. I take melatonin nowadays, and it seems to help. There are nights where I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, can't go to sleep. There are nights where I go to bed at night, I lay there until 2 o'clock in the morning because I can't sleep. I've struggled on and off with sleeping good. I sleep better with 2 boys, but still, I have those days where 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm still awake, so I'm going to watch Andy Griffith. And I just can't sleep. But there's been times also, before I met Krista, just back in the day, I would take a glass of milk and, like they say, I'd warm it up. And, I'd rather have cold milk with some Oreos, but, I would try it. But here you have Sisera. He's covered up. He's had a glass of milk. He's exhausted from all the events that happened that day. He's asleep. And Jael takes a tent peg that is long enough that it's going to go through his head and into the ground. And she hammers it in. Verse 21, then Jael, Heber's wife, took a tent peg and took a hammer in her hand and went softly to him and drove the peg into his temple, and it went down into the ground. for he was fast asleep and weary, so he died. Well, I imagine. And then, as Barak pursued Sisera, Jael came out to meet him. And so, picture this, Jael goes out to meet Barak, who is pursuing Sisera, and said to him, "Come, I will show you the man whom you seek." And when he went into the tent, there lies Sisera. Well, yeah, dead with a peg in his temple. So on that day, God subdued Jabin, king of Canaan, in the presence of the children of Israel. He and all his army destroyed. And the hand of the children of Israel grew stronger and stronger against Jabin, king of Canaan, until they had destroyed Jabin, king of Canaan. Chapter 5, I didn't get to it. We'll go through it a little bit next week. It won't take a whole class session to go through. It's just a song. I'm not going to break it down and spend time in chapter 5. So after this particular victory with Deborah and the Israelite army and Barak, after this victory over Jabin, the king of Canaan, and Sisera and everything, they sing a song of victory. And they include a lot of the events that took place. They include Jael, what Jael did to Sisera, and killing him with a peg. And they include in the song all of the tribes of Israel who helped. And they even include the tribes who did not help, that stayed behind and did not help with the victory. And so it's just a song of victory, praising God and rehashing the events that took place during this victory. So it's a song that's sung. We'll read through it next week, but then we'll jump into chapter 6 and continue reading about more judges, in particular Gideon. If I were to ask you the judges that you are familiar with, I'm sure you would say Deborah and Gideon, the two more familiar judges to us. So, any questions, comments, thoughts? Appreciate your attention this morning. All right. You are dismissed.
I try to do a little bit of time so it don't get to be too much. There you go. You have to. Right. Once you turn around, they'll be there. That's right. You gotta watch them do
Inline was there, Brody, his wife, Andrews was on the
That's a good study. Was it funny? Yeah, we're on Indiana. They came at 9:30 tonight. Right. So the question was, why is this young work like
No, we didn't go. I think that's what
take care of it.
No, man, said it.